Okay, so you mentioned just now vitrified ceramic. What exactly is that?
Yeah, great question. And there's actually a funny story behind that. I'll tell you how I learned about this. So as you mentioned, while I was creating this fountain, one of the things I did is I traveled into the mountains of rural China. It's like in the kind of in the south, so it's close to Xiamen. By the way, notice how the fountain just turned off because
There's no motion. Also, before you get into this story, another thing we have to talk about is how you learned Chinese before you went on this trip, or at least conversational Chinese.
Yeah, because so basically, so here's the thing, right? Porcelain was invented in China, right? I mean, that's why it's literally called China sometimes, right? Like porcelain. So porcelain was invented in China. By the way, you want to turn on the fountain with the motion sensor?
Sure, yeah. So if I move now, it's gonna.
Yep, there you go. Turns on, right? Yeah. So porcelain was invented in China, in 800 years ago. So that's in the 1200s, right? In the Ming Dynasty, right? So during the Ming Dynasty, the Chinese they invented porcelain, and so that's why I went there. I went to travel to the province in southern China, in the it's close to Xiamen. It's kind of in the south. It's a town called Dehua. It's in the mountains. And so yeah, I kind of brushed up on my Chinese a little bit because I knew it's such a remote place. They don't speak any English. Like forget about it, right? It's such a remote place. So I traveled up into those mountains and I just visited a lot of those different ceramic shops, right? And it's really fascinating because it's literally those are people who one guy specifically was like an old man who ran a ceramic shop, and he literally had the knowledge about porcelain passed down to him from generation to generation since the Ming Dynasty. Like he told me, it's like, my great grandfather, etc., etc. Like his ancestors from generation to generation passed down the knowledge about porcelain. And so I came to him with one of my prototypes. I brought one of those prototypes with me to him, and I started explaining it to him, and he really liked the idea. He was like really excited about it. But then after a while, he was kind of like looking at it. He kind of had like a unhappy look on his face, and he said like "buhao, buhao," which means not good, right? Buhao. And so I was like, like, what's wrong? What's the issue? And then he stood up. And it was really like this dark kind of workshop, like up in the attic. And he stood up and he's like, he's like, I want to show you something. And so he walked me back into this little room, and then he showed me a cup that's made from ceramic that had like cracks all throughout it. Like it had cracks everywhere on the outside in the glaze. And then what he explained to me was, this is what you call non-vitrified ceramic. And what non-vitrified ceramic is it's kind of fired at a lower temperature, and so what it does is it absorbs water. And so at first you don't notice. So for like 2 or 3 years it's fine, but after like 3 years it starts cracking. And so that's why he said, for this cat fountain I need to use vitrified ceramic. And so vitrified ceramic, it's completely waterproof, but it's a lot more harder to produce. It's a lot more harder to manufacture. And he explained it. He explained all those details to me, and that really started kind of a bit of a painful journey, to be honest, because it took about a year just traveling around the world. I hired every ceramic experts I could. I read all the books. I really got into the science of ceramics to figure out how you can create this kind of fountain with vitrified ceramic, because vitrified high temperature ceramic, it's hard to deal with because it warps when you fire it. So this kind of shape, and it's kind of funny. If you show this fountain to some ceramic experts and you tell them that this is made from vitrified ceramic, they'd be shocked. They'd be like, how is this possible, right? Because normally you can only make like small and very round kind of shapes with it. But so there's a lot of, I don't want to bore everyone with all the scientific details, but there's a lot of work that went into making this ceramic vitrified, which means it's waterproof. And that's just based on how it's fired, the heat. Yeah, so what happens basically is it fires at such a high temperature. It's not just the temperature, it's also the ingredients of the raw clay. It's fired to such a high temperatures that all the little cells like fuse together. Everything fuses completely together, and so it's completely shot and waterproof, even without glaze. So as you can see, some of those, let's say, if I take this tower here, this tower here on the inside and on the lower side, it doesn't have any glaze, right? But that's not a problem because it's vitrified ceramic, so it's completely sealed, completely waterproof. And that's something that's very rare. That's something really, if you buy, frankly, any ceramic, if you buy a cat, if you buy a pet fountain or any ceramic product, that's really something to look out for, that it's high temperature vitrified.
And is there a way we can sort of see the difference between vitrified versus just standard ceramic?
There's no way you can see. I mean, you can look at, there's different terms that they use, right? So people use porcelain is vitrified, right? Which is why the guy in the porcelain, the time where porcelain was invented, he knew all about it. There's stoneware is generally vitrified ceramic. Semi-porcelain is vitrified, and then earthenware is non-vitrified. So earthenware is generally, that's a absolute no-go for a pet fountain or anything that's in contact with water. So yeah, you can look at those terms, but most people aren't really even aware of the distinction. So yeah.
Because I know in the early days when you're creating this fountain, you had big issues with the shape would warp over time.
Yeah, and by the way, let me share this. There was, during this period, there was so much pressure from everywhere. There was so much pressure, everybody I talked to just settle and take the low quality ceramic. Because, like I said, the problems would only show up 3 years afterwards. So everybody was like, look, listen, it's fine, like you can sell it and it'll only start cracking like in 3 years. Or other people, or even better yet, a lot of people were saying, no, you could just cover it all in glaze. Just cover it all in glaze, and then it won't be a problem because the glaze will protect it. But I was just extremely stubborn. I was just extremely stubborn, and I just really insisted on having it made from high quality vitrified ceramic. And it almost, like, I bet the entire company on it. Like, it was kind of a dark time, actually.
And you're really not joking when you say this, because I watched from the outside as he suffered through this,
yeah,
like stubbornly. And I've known Faris for a few years now. He's quite a stubborn guy, and he really suffered for this. They went through so many different iterations. He had really, like, if you go to his bookshelf in his apartment, he has every book probably out there on ceramics. So basically, while you were making this fountain, you actually reinvented or maybe made a new way of, like, putting ceramics in the kiln?
I mean, there's a lot of details. So there's a lot of ways. So one thing is the ingredients of the ceramic. Another thing is the cycle of how you fire it, right? So there's a difference if you just fire it to like 2000 degrees Fahrenheit right away, or if you first fire it to like 500 degrees or 1000 degrees, then wait for 3 hours, then go through. So then actually the heating cycles are actually pretty complex, like, or even, I mean, these days there's other people who are in charge of our factory, but the heating cycles are pretty complex. That's one of the things. And then there's also some intricacies in the shape, you know.
I know you talked as well a lot about the drying process that you had when you first got to the factory as well.
Yeah. So it's really these ceramic a good ceramic factory is almost like a lab, you know, with like controlled temperature, controlled humidity, all those kind of things. That's very important as well, yeah, for to have.
And then I think how many years was it before you finally got it down to where it is?
It was so from the day I had this moment with this old man in the mountains of China where he explained it to me, from that day to the day where we were able to really create a fountain with the high quality ceramic. That was 1 year and 2 months, basically. 1 year and 2 months. And those were some of the darkest times of my life, to be honest with you, like, because all the people I studied with at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology at that time, they were designing rocket engines, they were doing all these things, and I just had this, I just couldn't solve this problem with the ceramic, and all the consultants, a lot of people, they just laughed at my face. A lot of the experts, you know, who've been making ceramics for 20 years, they're like, no, it's impossible, you can't do it, you know. And so it really kind of I bet the whole company on it, you know, and so.
I mean, it's pretty funny retrospectively to look at this and kind of laugh a little bit. Like, even outside of this interview, I often tell this story because it's kind of absurd, you know. You go to the mountains of China, you meet some old man who has been handed down this knowledge in ceramics for, you know, generations.
Yeah.
Like multiple generations, and they say it can't be done.
It's the Ming Dynasty.
Yeah. Most normal people would say, okay, I guess we got to find a new way. Whereas you were like, okay, that's not good enough. I'm not going to listen to this old guy who's had this information handed down for years.
Well,
I'm going to go back to basics. I'm going to find a whole new way of like firing ceramics. It's quite funny.
Actually, to give credit to this old man, the old man in the mountains in China, he was actually not that negative. He thought it was possible. It was more some of the other experts I hired later on who were more negative about it. But yeah, for sure, it took. You know, it was a tough bet to make. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you said now it's maybe one of the most successful products to come out of the Swiss Institute of Technology.
Yeah, that's funny. I was looking into this recently. So basically, it is for sure one of the most successful consumer products to have ever been made by an alumni of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Because again, to make a consumer product, you really need to understand what is it that people need, what is it that the cat needs, what is it that the cat really wants to drink from, how can you make it easy for people to clean it, etc. And then of course you need all the technical know-how as well. So, yeah.
It's quite amazing when we look at this. It seems very simple: 3 towers, a base, you know, a pump. But there's so many questions I can still ask you, and I'm going to ask you. And like, it's hard for me to even comprehend how much thought goes into what appears to be such a simple product.